Hello. Well, first of all, you might find it a little bit odd that I'm sat here with this background. It's because it's such a grotty day that there's really virtually no natural light, and Alistair's room happens to be the one that gets the best light, so I thought I'd kick him out, actually he's at nursery today, and use his room for recording it. So no, I'm not going to pay him any royalties. Anyway, I've been telling you a little bit about these Word and Excel and OpenOffice videos. And it occurred to me that you might already know about what you can actually use Word and Excel and OpenOffice for, but you might not. You might not realise the different things you can do with them. And even if you've used them a bit and know a bit about them, you might not know all of the different things and how many different things you can use them for. It's a huge range of things. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about it, and I've got a list to make sure I don't forget, because though in theory I know them, I might forget some of them while I'm talking. So I thought I'd tell you. The first one that's most obvious is you can use Microsoft Word, or the equivalent part of OpenOffice, to write letters, and that's probably the simplest use. But even there it can be a little bit more clever than that, because you can save a letter you've written and then open it up and change it later on. And that means you could write a letter to one person or one organisation, and then later on just change the name and the date and send it to someone else. And that might be useful for a kind of letter that you use several times. If you're in a society and you want to send a letter reminding people they need to pay their membership fees, that would be useful. Or even if you have a standard letter to send to organisations if they do something wrong, you could keep that and change the names. So even with a straightforward letter, there are several different ways you could use it. Now you can also use Word to create posters for a local club or society or whatever, or if you're having some kind of event. And that's something that people don't necessarily think of. The programs that a proper designer would use to create a poster are very, very complicated, but you can do it in Word and get something that looks 90% as good much, much more easily. It's the kind of thing that anyone can do rather than needing special training. And similarly, you can create things like invitations or cards, birthday cards or Christmas cards, by very easily putting a photo on and putting a bit of writing and maybe changing the font so the writing looks a bit more interesting. So you can make Christmas cards or birthday cards, things like that. You can also create newsletters, if you're in a club or society, and they can be as simple as you like or as complicated. So you can have just lots of text going down the page, just looks like a normal document, or you can have it quite easily put into columns with pictures in the columns, a bit like a magazine's laid out, and that's relatively straightforward to do in Word. You can also, this is one that most people don't know about, but you can also make a collage of photos. Now that a lot of photos are digital, or maybe you could scan in some paper photos that you've got, instead of making a collage by literally sticking them onto a piece of cardboard and then they might fall off, you can actually make it on the computer. Put them all at different angles, different sizes, maybe add some text if you want to remind you when they were taken. And then not only is it very easy for you to print it off for yourself, but if you want you can email that to someone else as well, or print it off for them as well. And you can have several copies of it. So that's quite a nice little extra that most people don't realise you can do. And you can keep things like, if you keep a journal or a diary, you can easily do that in Word. Or if you want to write up your memoirs, or even write a full book, that's the best program to do that in usually. And you can still add pictures in, or diagrams or anything else if you want as well. So that's what you can do in Word, and all of that you can also do in the equivalent part of OpenOffice. It's not just in Microsoft Word. I've jotted down some things you can do in Excel as well, which is the spreadsheet program that Microsoft create. It's always a little bit more complicated to explain, but there's quite a few things you can do in it. You can keep your own accounts in as much detail or as little detail as you want. I have a very simple spreadsheet because I've got several savings accounts. I've got an ISA, which is tax-free, and I've got a normal savings account as well, and then I've got my current account, and I've got an old savings account that I really should take the money out of and put into a better account. So I just have a column for each of these in a spreadsheet to tell me how much money I've got in each of those accounts that month, and then a column at the end that adds them all up to see how we're doing that month. And as it goes up and down, you can keep track of it and see how it's all going quite easily. But you could also keep it in more detail if you wanted, and list individual transactions. You can also track what you spend on a project, and this goes with another one I've put down, which is to track what needs doing on the project. Now this sounds like it might be a work thing, something you might do in a job, but it can also be useful at home. We did this when we were doing up our dining room. When we moved into this house, the dining room needed a lot of work doing. It was a bit of a mess. So we completely stripped out the room and redid it. So there were a lot of different things that had to happen, and they had to happen in the right order. Otherwise we might have ended up with paint splattered on the nice new wood floor or something like that. So we used a spreadsheet to keep track of the different things that needed to happen, what order they had to happen in, and who was doing them, whether we were doing them ourselves or getting the joiner in or so on. And we also kept track of the cost of each different step to make sure that it didn't end up going over what we'd assigned for the project, or at least if it was going to, we knew in advance so we could plan for that. You could also use it to keep a calendar, maybe for a society, or a list of dates of events happening. So if you've got set events in the society happening, you can make sure they don't clash. And you can keep track of anything really. It's very open-ended. You can do all sorts of things. So you could keep track of anything from what exercise you're doing if you're trying to get fit, or even the members of a society that you help run, and who's paid their dues and who's going to certain events and so on. By easily having a list of all the members and then another column for whether they've paid their dues and another column for whether they're, I don't know, whether they're coming to the AGM or whatever, and so on. So you can keep all of that in one document quite easily using a spreadsheet like Excel. And all of that, I've been talking about Word and Excel, but I should have really every time said or OpenOffice, because all of these things you can do in Word and Excel, which are programs that Microsoft created and you have to pay for, although possibly when you bought your computer the manufacturer had already bought a copy and put on there. But you can also do all of these things in OpenOffice, which is kind of equivalent but free. So all of these things can be done in either, and it doesn't really matter which one you use. So hopefully that's given you an idea of some of the different things, what the point of Word and Excel or OpenOffice is, why you'd actually want to use them, what kind of things you can do with them.